Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue. Thank you all for being here today for this important conversation on Voices of Resilience, the Women of Afghanistan, and the global fight for equality. It is an honor to moderate this event as we come together just 2 days before the International Women's Day, a moment to reflect on both the progress made and the challenges that persist. This event is not just about Afghanistan. It is about all of us. It is about the universal fight for women's rights, dignity, and equality. The struggle of women of Afghanistan is deeply connected to the global movement for justice and human rights. Their fight is the fight of all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our discussion, it is my great honor to introduce Her Excellency Ms. Manizha Bakhtari, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Afghanistan in Vienna, who will deliver the welcome remarks. Ambassador Bakhtari is a dedicated diplomat, an advocate for human rights, and a strong voice for the women of Afghanistan on the international stage. She has worked tirelessly to promote gender equality, education, and the rights of women in Afghanistan and beyond. At a time when Afghan women are facing unprecedented challenges, her leadership and advocacy remains vital in keeping their voices heard at the global level. Please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Ms. Manizha Bakhtari.
Thank you so much, Masya Jan, for your kind introduction. She sits by the window, watching the world move on without her. Once, she stood in the journalism faculty classroom, her voice guiding students through the pages of knowledge. Now, the university doors are closed to her, the hall silent where she once belonged. Her books remain untouched, her lessons left unfinished, her purpose taken away. She feels like a prisoner in her own home, not because of walls, but because of a rule that says she no longer has the right to teach, to share, to be seen. She was once the breadwinner of her home, raising her younger sisters and taking pride in their progress. Now, she has no income and no agency. The days pass heavy and empty, yet deep inside, she holds on to hope. The Taliban can lock her out of the university, but they can never take away what she knows, what she believes in, and what she still dreams of. This is the story of Ms. J.A., a faculty professor of the journalism faculty at Kabul University and a dear friend of mine. Dear Ms. Petra Bayer, honorable member of the parliament, ambassadors, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, and dear friends. It's a privilege to welcome you to the Voices of Resilience, the women of Afghanistan, and the global fight for equality. I also extend my deepest gratitude to the Republic of Austria and all the countries, organizations, excuse me, women's rights defenders, activists, and advocates, and individuals who have shown unwavering solidarity with the women of Afghanistan during these challenging years. Your support is more than an act of solidarity. It's a powerful declaration that injustice will not go unchallenged and that the fight for women's rights knows no borders. Dear all, happy International Women's Day 2025. We celebrate the strength, resilience, and achievements of women everywhere, reaffirming our commitment to equality, justice, and a future where every woman's voice is heard and valued. As we approach International Women's Day, we are reminded that while progress has been made, the fight for gender equality remains one of the most defining struggles of our time. Across the world, women continue to face discrimination, violence, and systemic barriers that limit their potentials. These challenges are not confined to one country or culture. They are a global concern demanding a collective response. Today, I turn our attention to Afghanistan, where women face one of the gravest human rights crises of the 21st century. They are enduring what can only be described as gender persecution and gender apartheid, a deliberate, systematic exclusion from public life, banned from education beyond the 6th grade, forbidden from working in most sectors, erased from society in ways unparalleled in modern history. The impact of these education bans is deeply alarming. According to the Afghanistan Gender Country Profile 2024 by UN Women, they have led to a 25% increase in child marriage, a 45% surge in adolescent pregnancies, and a 50% rise in maternal mortality. Yet, despite this oppression, our women refuse to be silenced. They continue to resist, speak out, and fight for their rights with extraordinary courage. Let me elaborate that legal actions have been initiated at both the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice to hold the Taliban accountable for crimes against humanity and violations of international law, particularly concerning women's rights under CEDAW. Germany, Canada, Australia, and the Netherlands are leading this effort with the support of other 25 countries. These proceedings represent a crucial step towards justice for the systematic oppression, gender apartheid, and human rights abuses inflicted upon the women of Afghanistan. I urge all nations to join to support this action. By bringing these violations before international courts, the global community reaffirms that such actions will not go unpunished and that those responsible must answer for their crimes. These legal efforts are not just about accountability. They are about defending the principles of justice, human dignity, and gender equality that no regimes should be allowed to violate. As a global community, we must confront this growing crisis before it destroys the very foundations of our societies. This means standing firm against gender apartheid and ensuring it's formally codified and recognized as a crime against humanity. Challenging the radical ideologies that fuel oppression and holding perpetrators accountable. Amplifying the voices of the women of Afghanistan, ensuring they are not just discussed, but included in all decisions regarding their future. Investing in their resilience through education, leadership programs, and economic opportunities, both inside Afghanistan and in the diaspora. Women are not just victims of extremism, they are its greatest challengers. By empowering them, we are not only protecting their rights, we are safeguarding the future of democracy, security, and progress. Just a few weeks ago, the 5th round of the Vienna process for a democratic Afghanistan brought together diverse voices from Afghanistan's political, civil, and academic spheres to discuss the country's future and explore solutions to its ongoing crisis. At its core, just like today's gathering, this process embodies resilience, resistance, human rights, women's rights, and equality. It reflects the unwavering determination my nation, both inside and in the diaspora, to reclaim their rights, dignity, and future. Let us use this gathering not only as a moment of reflection, but as a call to action. Let us reaffirm our shared responsibility to support the women of Afghanistan and all women fighting for their rights, because their struggle is our struggle. Their resilience is our inspiration, and their victory will be a victory for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bakhtari. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Petra Bayer, Honorable Member of the Austrian National Council and SPO spokesperson for Foreign Affairs and Global Development, a dedicated leader and a passionate advocate for women's rights and gender equality. Ms. Bayer has been at the forefront of efforts to drive meaningful change. She is currently chairperson of the Committee on the Election of Judges to the European Court of Human Rights at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, President of the European Parliamentarian Forum on Sexual and Reproductive Rights, member of the Committee on Strategy, Investment and Policy of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, and board member and treasurer of Parliamentarians for Global Action. Today, we are privileged to hear from her as she shares her valuable perspectives with us. Please join me in warmly welcoming Her Excellency Ms. Petra Bayer.
Thank you very much for this very nice introduction. I'm really very happy to be here with you. I really appreciate that I have the honor to hold a keynote to a topic which really touches my heart, and I think it's really key not only for women in Afghanistan, not only for the Afghan people in general, but for the whole humanity, as what we see is indeed a global disaster. So imagine a country with beautiful landscapes, snow-capped mountains, ancient heritage, human wisdom, vibrant and diverse people, rich in nature and resources. And this beautiful country is on war. With millions of victims, it is on war against women, about its own women. And many of you know this country much better than I do. It is your country, the country called Afghanistan. How does a war against an enemy within look like? Because women obviously are enemies, because why else would you raise all these efforts, all these, would you invest in a war against somebody who is not your enemy? A war against women and girls is when they are subject to a system of gender apartheid. And since the Taliban seized power in August 21, repression has intensified drastically. Afghan women are systematically excluded from education, employment, public life, and basic human rights. This is not only a political or a social, a humanitarian catastrophe, but also sends a very dangerous signal to other authoritarian regimes all over the world, and I would say not only to the authoritarian ones. According to the latest Amnesty International report, Afghan women and girls are not only excluded from nearly all aspects of public life, but they are also subject to systematic violence, arbitrary detention, and other human rights violations, very severe human rights violations. The report highlights that the international community has failed to take effective measures against these crimes. The lack of response to human rights violations in Afghanistan not only endangers the affected women, but also undermines the universal principles of equality and of human dignity. In 2023, amid of worsening humanitarian crisis and economic turmoil, the Taliban imposed increasing restrictions on women and girls, seemingly aiming to erase them from public life entirely. This period also saw a significant erosion of freedom of expression, with individuals peacefully expressing dissent, facing enforced disappearance, unlawful detention, arbitrary arrest, and torture, and many other ill treatment. The Taliban's draconian measures against women and girls are particularly severe, and now we really come to how to look at what war against women looks like. There are the employment restrictions. In April 2023, the Taliban extended the ban on women working outside the home to include positions at the United Nations, with the United Nations, further hindering the delivery of humanitarian aid. Bans remained on women working in the public sector, except in areas such as healthcare, primary education, and specific security institutions like airports or women's prisons. War against women is also to banish them from public presence. Women are prohibited from appearing in public life in public alone or traveling more than 72 kilometers without a male chaperone. Beauty salons were forcibly closed from July 2023, affecting approximately 60,000 women-owned businesses. Additionally, women continued to be banned from participation in sports activities or visiting public parks. In certain provinces, such as Herat, authorities introduced further localized restrictions, including banning unaccompanied women from dining in restaurants. Or it is war against women to ban them from education. The prohibition on girls' education beyond primary school persists. In June 2023, international NGOs, including UNICEF-led programs, were banned from providing community-based education and were instructed to transfer these programs to local organizations. Nearly 4,500 women were reported dismissed from educational roles during June and July 2023 only. According to the latest newsletter from the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, the Taliban continue to intensify their repressive policies. And it is again war when education and science comes under attack. University professors and scholars recently protested against the transformation of universities into purely religious institutions, effectively eliminating scientific research. Additionally, numerous female teachers and professors have been dismissed, and girls have been denied access to education beyond the sixth grade. It is systematic war on women when it comes to disenfranchisement. Human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch document a drastic deterioration in human rights conditions, particularly for women and girls. Women are no longer allowed to hold government positions and are barred from public spaces such as parks, gyms, and entertainment venues. Repressive punishment and violence is also a particular war against women. The public flogging and imprisonment of women for so-called moral offenses having sharply increased. The Taliban also had intensified surveillance and control over women's clothing and movement, conducting regular raids and imposing punishments. Also, war against women can look like religious indoctrination. Over 21,000 Islamist madrasas serve to spread extremist ideologies, further eroding women's rights in the long term. Many of these schools exclusively teach religious content and prepare young men for a militant future, which also will lead into a war against women. But it's also a war against women if it comes to the restriction of humanitarian aid. Women are no longer allowed to work for international NGOs in many regions, severely hampering the delivery of vital aid to men and children. Of course, also forced marriages and gender-based violence is a war against women. Reports of forced marriages to Taliban fighters are increasing, and women have little legal resources to protect themselves from domestic or gender-based violence. So there are lots and lots of weapons left in the region when foreign forces decided to give up and to leave, and the weapons now also will be and are turned against women as a means of war against them. And let me also come to something which Mrs. Ambassador already mentioned, maternal mortality. It always was a big problem, and Afghanistan always was among the highest numbers of maternal mortality, and it meanwhile increased to the most highest numbers in the world. In terms of maternal mortality. Challenges such as political instability, the COVID-19 pandemic and what came afterwards, unskilled staff were already before the Taliban started to destroy the health system in its fundaments. Along with the struggling healthcare system, illiteracy and ignorance are further exacerbating the maternal health issue. The exclusion of women from medical education and training will lead to even higher numbers of women and newborns who will die during pregnancy and delivery. Analyzing war against women in Afghanistan, we must not forget that there is also a significance on the global women's rights movement. The international community must not view the situation in Afghanistan in isolation. The targeted opposition of Afghan women carries the risk to undermine women's rights globally. In the international community, if the international community ignores these human rights violations, it sends signals to acceptance, and it could lead to further setbacks, as we see it all over the world, including the US and other countries, also here in Europe, as we know, especially in all these countries where women's rights are already under pressure now. So, people of Afghanistan, men, women, children need our solidarity and really need, importantly, our political action. How could this political action look like? To mention some possible ways forward. There are necessary measures to be taken on the global level to counteract these negative trends, and a united and determined response is really required. So we really must think about impose further international sanctions to the Taliban. The National Resistance Front of Afghanistan recently welcomed the introduction of targeted sanctions against Taliban leaders by the International Criminal Court. These measures must be expanded, including other Taliban officials than now only. We also have to strengthen exile networks. Afghan women rights activists abroad must be provided with financial and institutional support to pressure governments, also their government and international organizations, to really act on behalf of them. Asylum and protection programs are really important and needed, and Europe really must intensify efforts to accept at-risk Afghan women, particularly human rights defenders, journalists, and academics. We will see how the new Austrian government will deal with these demands, and I can promise that I really will try to be an advocate for Afghan women who are at risk. We need much more diplomatic pressure. Governments must stop treating the Taliban as legitimate negotiation partners and instead actively support civilian resistance in Afghanistan. Humanitarian assistance must be provided without accepting Taliban as official partners on the international level, knowing that this is very tricky in practice. The making of the international, we must make the international justice fit for this very specific crime. And it was mentioned the gender apartheid, and it was also mentioned that I'm active at the Parliamentarians for Global Action organization, where we deal a lot with the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court. And so we really are trying to have included the gender apartheid in the Rome Statute, which is the foundation of the International Criminal Court, but also the ICJ case of the violation of CEDAW Convention should be followed by many more countries. And of course, also the Vienna process was mentioned. We really have to look that we include women everywhere when it comes to a future of Afghanistan on the table, that they have a saying. And we need to express our solidarity with all these people who stand up against the Taliban. To conclude, imagine a country where people have the power and voted for a constitution that states that everybody is equal, and voted for a parliament that enshrines all ethnicities and minorities, and all genders, of course, as well. Imagine a country where everybody feels safe and protected regardless of gender, language, ethnicity, age, or other personal specificities, where girls and women go to school laughing, being curious, with the certainty that in the future they will profit from the beauty and the richness of their country. Imagine a country with total absence of fighting and of conflict, of violence and discrimination, of malnutrition and starvation. Imagine a country where everybody has access to justice, healthcare, higher education, public services, and individual development without any restriction. Also, this country is called Afghanistan. An Afghanistan that determined its war against women, where women are equal partners in constructing a new, a better, a inclusive, a brighter Afghanistan. The Afghanistan we all are here to fight for hand in hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bayer. International Women's Day is just around the corner. On 8 March, we celebrate the strength, achievements, and the rights of women worldwide. But what do women's rights and International Women's Day mean to individuals? We set out to ask women and girls this very question, and they have shared their perspectives. Let's hear their thoughts.
Every Afghan girl should be able to dream of becoming a doctor, a teacher, a journalist, or a leader, and actually have the chance to make it happen.
حقوق زنان به معنای برابری در فرصت‌ها، احترام، آزادی انتخاب در تمام جنبه‌های زندگی است. جامعه‌ای که به حقوق زنان احترام می‌گذارند، عادلانه‌تر، پیشرفته‌تر، پایدارتر هستند. صلح، پیشرفت و ترقی در افغانستان بدون تأمین حقوق زنان ممکن نیست.
Women's Day in Afghanistan is a day when women fight for their lost rights instead of celebrating.
Women's Day in Afghanistan is a cry against the silence imposed upon them.
In Afghanistan, Women's Day is not a celebration. It is a pledge to continue the struggle.
A day when the women of Afghanistan proved that the freedom is a right, not a privilege.
Women's Day in Afghanistan is a cry for justice in a world that still refuses to listen.
In Afghanistan, Women's Day is a reminder of pain, struggle, and hope for a future without oppression.
Women's Day in Afghanistan means continuing the fight for education, work, and freedom.
Women's Day in Afghanistan means hope that survive even in the hardest day.
Women's Day in Afghanistan is a wound of inequality and a symbol of resistance against it.
In Afghanistan, Women's Day is a symbol of resilience, not a moment of festivity.
The day when Afghan women and girls remind the world that their struggle is not over yet.
A day when the women and girls of Afghanistan ask for freedom instead of flowers.
Apologize for the technical issue. Thank you to all the women and girls who share their voices and perspectives. Their reflection remind us why the fight for women's rights remains as important as ever. We will have a just 2 minutes break to set up the panel, and then we will start with our panel. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? As we continue, we are privileged to have with us today a remarkable panel of speakers who bring diverse perspectives and expertise to the panel discussion, Voices of Resilience, the Women of Afghanistan, and the Global Fight for Equality. It is my great honor to introduce our esteemed moderator, Her Excellency Ms. Veronique Pepin-Halle, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Canada to the OSCE. With her extensive diplomatic experience and deep commitment to women's rights, she brings invaluable insights and leadership to today's discussion. Ambassador Pepin-Halle joined the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in 2002. After having worked in the Department of Public Information at the United Nations in New York City, she began her career at headquarters as desk officer for the Middle East in the Security and Defense Relations Division. She has also held various positions in the Office of the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Global Issues and Development Branch and in the Foreign Policy Planning Division. Abroad, she has represented Canada in Jordan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, at the mission to the United Nations in New York City, and at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Most recently, she was Deputy Director for the NATO and OSCE section, and in August 2024, Ms. Pepin-Halle was appointed Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. We are privileged to have her guide this conversation, ensuring a thoughtful and engaging exchange of ideas. Please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Ms. Veronique Pepin-Halle.
Thank you very much. I think what we'll do is to ask the panelists to take the floor. I think we have some online as well. I don't know if you want to... Okay. Okay. Yes.
You have to, these two share.
Yeah, so they can take that, absolutely. So mine is enough? Or?
Yeah.
This is enough?
For you,
and I will give it to others, okay. Okay. I'm just gonna, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being here. It's quite, it speaks a lot to have a full room today on such a wonderful sunny day. It speaks to the fact that this issue is very important to a lot of us. I also want to to thank Her Excellency, Mrs. Manizha Bakhtari and her team, very able, not that big, but very mighty, for convening us today on this very important issue and for this very impressive panel, I have to say. I think this is absolutely great. Again, it speaks to the crucial issue that this is for many of us. It's not only about the situation of Afghan women, but it's their importance in the global fight for equality. As well, thank you to the Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue for hosting us here. I think this is great, and I think the venue is really has a lot of history. So thank you for that. We have a very diverse panel with very knowledgeable panelists. It is also an issue close to my heart. Before I leave it, and to the others, because the fight for equality is also an important issue for me, but also the role of Afghan women. I've met many, many incredible Afghan women through my career, and I never cease to be amazed by their strength and resilience and empowerment in the face of diversity. But I have also witnessed firsthand, while being in Kandahar, because I was not in Kabul, but I was in Kandahar, how men can also willingly and believingly want to fight and for their daughters, for their sisters, for their mothers. They also believe in a just society that ultimately would be better for all. This just speaks to the fact that it's not only a fight by and for women, it's a fight by whole of society. And we not forget that it's not obvious always all the time, but there are many allies still. So, without further delay, I will turn to the panel. I'm gonna skip a little bit, but here I think we have one panelist last. So I think it's important that we first give the voice to an Afghan woman here. So Mrs. Farah Ariana, who is the president of and speaker of Solidarity Group of Afghanistan. In her work as social worker and counselor, she specializes in support for women and refugees and survivors of domestic violence in Vienna. As a women's rights activist, she works to build bridges between Afghanistan and Austria by raising awareness through protest, open letters, and community events, fostering solidarity and mutual understanding. Thank you for being here, and please. So the point is I will give the floor to everybody for a few minutes, and afterwards I will invite a dynamic Q&A. So please, Mrs.
Thank you so much. How many minutes do I have, just so I know when to wrap it up?
Around 5 minutes.
Okay,
and we'll make sure to ask questions to you afterwards, so if you feel that you still have much more to say.
Thank you so much. It's a very pleasure and honor to be here among everyone. Also my mentor and teacher, Ms. Edith Schlaffer, who I have learned so much from the past few years that we have been working together. And the term bridge builder is something that she calls me, refers to me as someone who has lived here in Austria, but also in Afghanistan, and tries to bring both communities together to advocate for the women and girls in Afghanistan. I'd like to share a personal story, maybe, from the time when I went back to Afghanistan as a child, after the first Taliban regime collapsed, just to give my insights, what it was like to go back to a country where women and girls were banned from going back to school for 5 years. So I went back to Afghanistan as a 7, 8-year-old probably, and I started school, and I was in the same class as girls who were twice my age, 15, 16, 17. Unfortunately, some of them had to leave school because they couldn't skip classes or they couldn't continue their education. Some of them very young, at some point had to get married, so they discontinued their education and stopped. I went on to visit a few more classes, but then unfortunately I had to leave the country as well. But my friends, my classmates who stayed in Afghanistan, they finished their high school, they went to universities, they started having jobs, they started going into workforce, starting to turn a page for Afghanistan. And this is the story of so many girls and women under the age of 30 who did not have any experience of what the Taliban regime was like. All we knew, when I went back to Afghanistan, all I knew about Afghanistan was the fact that the Taliban that now are gone were a terrorist group that forced women into children, young women, into marriage, forcefully married young girls, kidnapped them, abused them, harassed them. Not only girls and women, but also men just randomly showed up at houses, continued their house searches, and took young men, including some of my family members, away. So the memories that we had from the Taliban was just a terrorist group, a brutal, cruel regime that has no respect for women, for men, for human dignity, or anything. But we didn't get to see them. But we lived in their shadows somehow. The 20 years, despite everything, women and girls were able to go back to school. The schools were rebuilt. Also, maybe interesting, when I started school, we were in the same class. We were like 100 students, all packed in one class because there were not enough buildings and classrooms for students. And then that changed throughout the years. We had other classes, more classes were built, more schools were built, universities were built, and people could continue their education. So despite the challenges, despite the bomb attacks and kidnapping and killing and everything that the Taliban did in the past 20 years before their takeover, to traumatize the people of Afghanistan, to continuing to torment them, to cause them pain, to cause them suffering. So many people lost their families in these bomb attacks. But despite everything, there was hope. There was hope for a future. There was a hope for a future without the Taliban. The youth had hope, and they had so much determination. They were flourishing and blooming. thinking they have a chance to rebuild the country, to start a different chapter for their own country. Because we're so tired of being a charity case of the world. We're so tired of being the social case of the world. We wanted to have everything in our hands and build our country and just have a different country that we are proud of, that we acknowledge, that we say we have something and have, and to just look eye to eye in other countries and not be their charity case. Unfortunately, the fall happened. And then in the past 3 years, the very same women continue raising their voices. I mean, we have heard their testaments here. And now with the Women's Day coming up, for everyone else, Women's Day is a day of celebration, of a day of achievements, how much the world has achieved, how much advances, how much rights they have, the struggle that finally resulted in something. But for the women of Afghanistan, this is another reminder of the pain and the suffering and the erasure that you're experiencing, the gender apartheid that they're experiencing. It is disheartening and it's sad to see this, but what is more sad is to see that the past 3 years, they come up, they talk about their trauma, they re-traumatize themselves by talking about their traumas, by talking about their experiences under a terrorist regime, by talking about their experience in the Taliban prisons, by sharing their experience of rape and sexual assault and abuse that they have experienced the past 3 years in the Taliban prisons. With Ms. Rafa, we have interviewed many of those women who were either taken to prison by the Taliban because of their protests, and they were not asking for too much. They were simply asking for the right to return to school, bread, work, freedom, non-kar azadi. That was their very, very fundamental basic demands. But they were, for these same demands, they were arrested, taken to prison, tormented. They shared their experiences, and the world just watched. Nothing happened, and now we hear more and more that the world is ready to negotiate with the Taliban. Even here in Austria, I mean, there are talks that in exchange for sending the refugees back, we might start talking to the Taliban, start having conversation with them and have deals with them to return the refugees, which is not only a political mistake, but also a moral and ethical one, because you don't negotiate with the terrorists. The Afghan government and so many other people that have had the opportunity to sit at the table with the Taliban know very well that they are not reliable. You cannot trust them. You cannot trust their words. So it's really fascinating to me to think that politicians or people could be so naive to think that Taliban are reliable partners where you can negotiate with them and sit with them. When the government has tried this in Afghanistan, it didn't go anywhere. They made so many promises to the women of Afghanistan, to the people of Afghanistan, didn't back any of them, didn't fulfill any of them, broke all of them. Even the promises they made with the US broke all of them and withdrew from their Doha agreement, with no consequences whatsoever. So it's really interesting to me to hear that people think they can talk with the Taliban and make them accept a deal and negotiate with them when the Taliban are not reliable partners. I mean, the people of Afghanistan who they claim to be one of them, like the Taliban claim to be from Afghanistan, and the people of Afghanistan that are their people, they are not even kind to their own people with whom they have a few things in common, such as religion or maybe a few things. So I wonder what the Western community thinks with the Taliban, how they can negotiate with the Taliban when the Taliban have nothing in common with the Western community, with the Western values, with the values that the West stands for, which is human rights, human dignity, respect for these rights. So yeah, it is very surprising to me. And how many more minutes do I have?
I'm not counting.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can,
just one last point, since it's about the women of Afghanistan and how their fight is a fight for the entire world. I mean, I think one more important thing that I would like to really mention is that the women of Afghanistan are not only fighting for themselves, but also for the entire, for all the women around the world, through the campaigns that they are leading, the gender apartheid campaign that we hope has gone into negotiations that we hope the UN countries vote for, the states vote for, to be implemented and accepted as in the term gender apartheid to be in the Human Rights Treaty. That is a protection for all women around the world. And the women of Afghanistan are right now at the forefront of this struggle and this fight to protect all women around the world, because quite honestly, with the climate and the current situation that we have now, we are literally one misogynist president and one misogynist regime away from losing all our rights. The Handmaid's Tale may be a fiction in so many other countries. It's a movie, it's a book, but in Afghanistan, it's the very reality of the woman. That would be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Ariana. Thank you as well for giving us such a personal, but as well the voice of an activist, both at the same time. Unfortunately, The Handmaid's Tale is made by a Canadian author, so I will. No, just saying. Things are always very close, but you're absolutely right. Thank you for that. I will now pass the floor to Mrs. Natasha Meli-Dowdy, who is the ambassador of Malta to Austria, permanent representative of Malta to the OSCE and United Nations and other international organizations in Vienna. She is also a great colleague. In 2024, she aptly led the OSCE chairpersonship in Vienna of the OSCE. It was troubled time at the very last minute, and she did so not just only with great ability, and I'm speaking from a personal perspective, but always with a personal touch. She never shied away or excused herself for being a woman in a leadership role. Instead, you've showed us the strength of being a woman in such a role. So I thank you very much, dear Natasha, for doing this with such confidence. So that was my little peeve, but talk. I will now give you the floor as you will talk on, you'll focus on the persisting challenges of having a coherent international approach that advances a political pathway for Afghanistan while ensuring human rights accountability, using some examples that you have yourself gone through in your country, Malta, both at the UN Security Council and at the OSCE as chairpersonship. Dear Ambassador Natasha, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Veronique, for that very nice introduction. And thank you to you, Manizha, for organizing this and for all of you being here. And I think I've never been so happy to see so many men in a room, because this shows that we have a lot of allies, because as has been said before, this is not just the plight of the women of Afghanistan. This is the plight of us women, which we will continue fighting, but we cannot win it without the allies. So thank you very much for being here, because if you're here, it means that you are supporters. And of course, as International Women's Day approaches, we take stock and we maybe even look at the backsliding, which happens and still happens in the West. But my heart aches, of course, when I hear the experience that you've just shared with us, and when you hear all these girls who are deprived of their fundamental freedoms. And unfortunately, it seems that the Taliban doesn't relent from its war on women. They have very recently banned all women from medical training facilities, and even more recently they have even changed the definition of a child, which means that they will basically put girls towards marriage and other things, which is just unheard of. So we really have a responsibility, and you are right in saying, as the international community, we have a responsibility not just to condemn or to show solidarity, because that we do, but we have a responsibility, and that is the biggest challenge that we have, I admit, that we do not have a coherent international approach for political pathways, for pathways towards Afghanistan. And I think we all can say mea culpa at this point, because somehow we are not doing enough, or not knowing how to do it, or not knowing how to coordinate what we are doing. And this is extremely important. I would rather like to focus on 3 reasons, because I know that we don't have a lot of time. First of all, we have to be careful. It has been mentioned a lot. If we do not stop what is happening in Afghanistan, we might encourage others to follow suit, or at the very least, we might end up with a situation where what the women in Afghanistan are enduring becomes the new normal. We do not want that. Second, we have to kind of stop looking at the women of Afghanistan. Charity, you mentioned. You need protection and you need solidarity, but you need more than that. The women in Afghanistan needs representation, needs empowerment, and you, Ambassador, mentioned it very well in your speech. And as the international community, we have to work for that, because otherwise, we don't have objects here. We have women, we have human beings, we need to empower them, and we need to recognize the strength that they are showing, both inside but also outside of Afghanistan in their plight. And that is our responsibility as the international community, to provide a platform. And then there's accountability. We know that these human rights violations need to find justice one day or another, and we need to provide a platform for that. And so what I will do in the next few minutes that I have at my disposal is to give a few examples, and I don't want to boast with what my country did, but I just want to show a few examples of what we can do as the international community, and hopefully I know there are other colleagues also amongst the audience, and hopefully not only this can be repeated, but maybe we can start to work a bit more together. So Malta, which is one of the smallest countries, happened to be on the Security Council between 2022 and 24. And also then we chaired the OSCE. But during our Security Council tenure, exactly 2 years ago, at the time of International Women's Day, we made it a point to bring Afghan women and Afghan human rights defenders to meet with the 15 Security Council members. Five of them are permanent and they are quite powerful. And that gave a platform for the Afghan women to, one, really explain the context and the challenges they're facing, but also to come forward with their perspectives of how they feel or they see or they think that the international community and the largest security body of the world can come to their aid and can help them. And it has aided as well the Security Council members of the time to better understand how not only the Security Council, but the United Nations system can come to the aid of the Afghan women, but also women's rights at large. And on that particular occasion as well, together with Albania, we organized a press staken, a Security Council press staken, where for the very first time, an Afghan human rights defender was given the platform and spoke in front and to international media. And this is one way of how we can give a bit more agency, representation, and why not, yes, empowerment to Afghan women, because they are not just there for charity. They are not just there to be protected. They need to be given the voice that they deserve. And then there was also another event where there was a meeting with legal experts and human rights defenders where they studied together ways and means how the Security Council could eventually help them. Then there is accountability, and this is most probably the most difficult part, but we should not shy away, because without justice, and we talk about this also for in other contexts, if we leave impunity, there's no justice, and then the perpetrators will feel free and they will continue. So earlier this year, Malta co-hosted a conference entitled Afghanistan Next Steps for an ICJ case on violation of CEDAW and other avenues to justice. A small step, a drop in the ocean most probably for the Afghan woman stuck in Afghanistan. It's not giving them a solution anytime soon, but hopefully it gives them some hope, and we need more of these initiatives. Then something else that we did during our OSCE chairpersonship, many of you might not even know, there is an OSCE academy in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, that offers education to, amongst others, Afghan women. And this is what Afghan women are being denied. And so, of course, there were some issues there, and we continued supporting that, because we should try not to lose more generations in this war against women. And I'm very looking forward to also, in terms of our chairpersonship of the Asian Partners Group for Cooperation, together with Afghanistan, very soon, on the 7th of April, we will discuss with the 57 OSCE participating states, plus the 11 partners for cooperation, the issue, the pivotal role of education and women engagement. So, colleagues, I will stop here because I know that the time is limited, but this is the point that I wanted to make. International responsibility is there. We need to be more coherent. And let's not forget that the Afghan women, wherever they are, they need not only our support, not only our pity and solidarity, they need us to give them a voice and a platform. They need us to give them representation, and they need us to empower them. And I really would like to express all my admiration to you, Manizha, and to all your team, and to all of you Afghan women who are fighting back home and wherever you are in the diaspora. Thank you.
You can give it to Thank you very much for this, and also for these examples. Sometimes it feels that international relations are far away, but it's always good to give us a concrete example of, even though they're a drop in the oceans, they help us believe that we can do little changes. I will now turn to Her Excellency Mrs. Anne-Marie Callan, Permanent Representative of Ireland to the OSCE, another great colleague. She has previously been Ireland's ambassador to the Slovak Republic and Ireland's head of mission in Sierra Leone, so also good experience there. Because I have the privilege of having her as a colleague as well, I have to say she's an incredible role model for me as well, and a voice for diversity and gender, and a gender champion at the OSCE. She speaks from the heart, but also she speaks the truth and doesn't shy away from that. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for that. So it is no surprise that her presentation will focus on gender equality in education, which also is a good step from where you actually, and the meeting that you are planning in Afghanistan, but also in its global context, giving an overview of Ireland's approach this time. The Ambassador, Anne-Marie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Veronique, for a very kind introduction. And also I'd like to add my voice of thanks to Manizha and her team, and also to all of the speakers so far, but particularly let me have a shout out for human rights activists, because the work you do is so very important and we very much appreciate it. I come from a small island nation, like my colleague Natasha, a small country of 5 million people, so located on the west of Europe. So you might say, well, you know, what interest do we have in these issues? I suppose, put very simply, you know, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, we see that those issues as being fundamental to achieving Ireland's overarching foreign policy and a goal, and that goal is the goal of a more equal, peaceful and sustainable world. So at the broadest level, we see these issues as extremely important. And when it comes to education, you know, as well as being a basic right, we know that education is critical to fostering gender equality. And if we look at where we are globally, unfortunately, the picture isn't that bright. You know, according to the Sustainable Development Goal progress reports, if you look at the Goal 5, which is gender equality, we're very clearly off track, and no target has been met or almost met. And unfortunately, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is ensuring inclusive and equitable education for all, that has also faltered. And it seems that no target for that goal is expected to be achieved by 2030. So globally, we're not in a very good place, I have to say. You know, at current rates, it seems that 110 million girls will remain out of school. Over 340 million women and girls So that's an estimated 8% of the global female population live in extreme poverty, and close to 1 in 4 will experience moderate or severe food insecurity by 2030. At present, 1 in 4 girls are not in education, employment or training, compared to 1 in 10 boys. So that's a pretty stark statistic. And we know that, and as was mentioned by Manizha earlier on, that educating women and girls delivers unique multipliers. So the kind of effects that those multipliers will produce include reducing poverty, reducing early and forced marriage, and reducing infant mortality. So these are really, really, really key issues. And by not addressing them, what we're finding is that if we don't invest in education, and particularly the education of girls, it's going to cost the world an estimated $10 trillion. I mean, you've heard the issues in Afghanistan, which are extreme. So globally, we're in a difficult position, but I think the case of Afghanistan really, shows us where we could be headed if we don't take this issue seriously. So you might say, well, okay, well, what does a small country like Ireland do about this globally and specifically in relation to Afghanistan? Well, globally, what we've done is we've invested a huge amount in gender equality. So of our development cooperation spending, 69% of the bilateral allocable ODA is focused on gender equality as a principal objective. We've also made fairly strong commitments on our support for education. And we've now, between 2020 and 2024, we've exceeded those commitments. And we will continue on really prioritising education and spending on education. But coming back to where I started, we also really see the central role of civil society and human rights defenders, because obviously what they do is key in driving progress on gender equality and indeed on education. And we very much see that women's right to equal participation is absolutely crucial, as was said earlier, in all elements of political decision making. And I think it's important for all of us to champion the rights of women and girls, including through increased financial investments, but also to do so in terms of raising our voice internationally. And in Ireland's case, I can tell you that access to free and high quality education was a very important part of our economic and social transformation. And I'm part of the generation that benefited from that. So that's something that we as a country, we want to see this, other countries, including Afghanistan, to have the kind of benefits that we've seen from investing in education. I don't know how much time I have left, but
I'll say a minute.
A minute. So let me just simply say a couple of quick things about what we've done in terms of raising our voice, and some of this work we've done with Canada and with others. So, but again, at the United Nations, we've raised the issue of Afghanistan in the third committee, which is the Human Rights Committee, and we've strongly condemned the widespread human rights abuses of the Taliban and denounced their systematic oppression. We've also called for a reversal of their decrees and accountability for what they have done, particularly these severe human rights abuses that we've heard about earlier on. And also, what we found that at the UN itself, that we've had a number of opportunities to raise the issue of Afghanistan. Just last September at UN High Level Week, together with Indonesia, Switzerland and Qatar, we were involved in a partnership with the Women's Forum on Afghanistan, and we co-hosted an event with them entitled The Inclusion of Women in the Future of Afghanistan. And our current Prime Minister, who was then the Minister for Foreign Affairs, was present at that event, and he has committed that we will continue to ensure that the issue of Afghanistan and women's rights have a high priority on the international agenda. Similarly, again, with Canada and some other NGOs, in October last year, we raised, during UN Women, Peace and Security Week, we raised the issue of Afghanistan, and we also were involved in a discussion that provided a safe space for Afghan women to talk freely about what they've experienced during Taliban's rule. There are a number of other examples, but I know time's short, so I won't go into them. But I think it is a combination of countries raising their voices, investing resources, and also trying to come together and create a space for the women of Afghanistan to be heard internationally. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this account as well. I think sometimes it's good to put a number. You know, you're talking $10 trillions, so sometimes a reminder that even the rights, there's a cost as well. Thank you for this intervention. I will sort of close the loop on the OSCE. I'm very sorry for doing this, but and I will invite as well somebody that's very important for her work at the OSCE and the efforts that she's doing. Dr. Lara Scarpita is the OSCE Senior Advisor on Gender Issues, and she's the head of the Gender Issue Program at the OSCE. She's an important actor for us in the organization, but also in the region. There's a lot of activities that are being done, and she's very active in reaching out to the OSCE region and to the partner countries as well. She's an expert of women, peace, and security with over 15 years of expertise in promoting women's rights and inclusion in peace and mediation efforts. Her presentation will focus on the importance of global solidarity by sharing some examples of OSCE's concrete action in supporting Afghan women. Dr. Scarpita, Laha, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you all today, even if regrettably only in person, online and not in person. And I want to begin really by expressing my gratitude to Ambassador Bakhtari for hosting these vital discussions, and also for the opportunity to share some of the OSCE perspective and efforts to support Afghan women. I want also to pay tribute to the Afghan women that are with us today, and they're following these discussions. Their resilience is incredible. Their courage is incredible. And I believe they are a model for all of us. I want to somehow begin by sharing with you what a young Afghan woman, Ilham Kosmani, a really young, bright woman that we directly supported through our programs, told us in a high-level event in Geneva Peace Week last year. She was asked during their intervention to define for herself a personal definition of peace. And she replied, "Peace for me is just a dream." And indeed, that was quite of a strong remark, because we do know that for many women and girls in Afghanistan, peace and rights are just a dream. And we are also very familiar, and we heard it today, about the dire situation that the total population, the female population in Afghanistan is facing today, with a complete denial of their basic human rights just because they are women. And we also know, because of the important work that the OSCE is doing, and the Bishkek Academy was mentioned, but our field operations are doing on the ground, we also know very well the dire situation of the difficulties that many Afghan women in exile are facing. I will not go into the details about these difficulties because they've also been mentioned, but I would like to really focus on the importance of this global solidarity and also share examples of the work that we are doing concretely to support them. And as Natasha and Anne-Marie have already pointed out, global solidarity is crucial in this context. Is not only about to providing much needed support and resources, but also it's important for every single country and the 57 participating states across the OSCE to send clear messages throughout all international fora that Afghan women are not forgotten. The rights of Afghan women are the rights of every single women around the world. And we have to fight for their rights in order to protect our own rights. This is certainly the Afghan women's rights are therefore very high on the OEC agenda, given the fact that we have a very strong mandate on gender equality. In terms of concrete actions, in the way in which we put this solidarity into action concretely, let me give you three examples. First of all, we invest in women peace builders by providing them with learning, networking, and mentoring opportunities. We do have 2 programs where we systematically engage Afghan women, the Young Women Leadership Program that many of you know about, and also Young Women for Peace initiative targeted to Central Asia, where we also have young Afghan women who are participating. And we are providing them with, through these programs, with essential skills in leadership, mediation, communication, advocacy. And with these programs, of course, we aim to support them, to give them visibility, and also provide them with opportunities in international fora, for example, during the Commission on the Status of Women or Geneva Peace Week, or during high-level events at the OEC. We also continue working by raising awareness and provide recommendation to support the young women of Afghanistan through economic empowerment. One new initiative that my team has launched is a extensive needs assessment to see how digital tools can empower women of Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan, including the young women in Central Asia. This needs assessment is being finalized. We did something similar for the women of Ukraine, where we trained over 600 women of Ukraine with digital skills. And we hope that with the publication of this needs assessment, we'll then be able to launch dedicated actions to support women of Afghanistan through digital tools to open them opportunities in the digital market. And finally, we are also, again, as I mentioned, providing them concrete opportunities and platform to amplify their voices in international fora. And this is extremely important because these are opportunities for them to connect, but also to advocate and keep the issue high on the agenda. So to conclude, I believe that the road forward requires truly our collective commitment and sustainable action. No single organization or initiative can really address the many challenges that the women of Afghanistan are facing today. But I believe that by combining our resources, expertise, and platforms, and the advocacy of individual countries and individual ambassadors, we can really create all the meaningful opportunities for Afghan women to participate and also continue bringing and keeping the issue high on the agenda. To conclude, I really urge all of us to continue working, and I really believe that events like this are unique occasions to also identify how best we can all work together for this common fight. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Lara, and I can say that the dynamism that you bring to this file that you believe so much in is very welcome. I'm very grateful for that at the OSCE. I had the chance to meet several young women that you've helped, provide the tools to better hear their voice. I would like now to turn to Dr. Edith Schlaffer, who's a social scientist who founded Women Without Border, WWB, in 2001. The purpose of this was to build up the competence and confidence of women to effect positive social change in countries of crisis and transition around the world. In her work, she focuses on gender-based peace-building strategies that harness the strength of civil society in building a new security architecture from the bottom up. Thank you, Dr. Schlaffer. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And I would like to thank first Honorable Ambassador Manizha Bakhtari. I think you show us how to do diplomacy and how to do power differently. I mean, this is what we learn from you, what we can see, and this is very important at this time. At a time where we are speaking in Austria, and also I do think this is a very good place. Austria has been an empire that was crumbling. And we can see the emergence of a new global empire, the empire of autocrats across the globe. And when you say that we at Women Without Borders focus on countries in crisis and transition, these countries are not only Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, I don't know, the number is endless. It's about us. We are also in crisis and transition. We wouldn't have thought so a couple of months ago, but we learn it every day when we switch on the news feeds, what this means. And I would also like to greet the participants from Afghanistan, particularly the civil society combatants, very important. I think you make a difference from bottom up. And Farhad, when you say there was a window of hope, I think it's not closed because the women in Afghanistan are on the ground working every day relentlessly, and they are believing and trusting that life will change and life will have a different shape. And also the Afghan women in their diaspora, they join forces. What is needed is that action is taken, I'm so sorry, action is taken also from all of us, that we have to join forces, of course. And on a personal note, I would also like to add that in my long life, over many decades, what I have seen in my childhood is also the crumbling of strongholds, of different powers. I grew up on a farm at the Iron Curtain in the easternmost country in Bundesland in Austria, and the farm of my grandmother was, the fence of the farm was the Iron Curtain, and there was a watchtower, and we saw the guys with the Kalashnikov watching over us when we played in the fields. And all of a sudden, this empire crumbled. So I don't think that this is forever, what is going to happen in Afghanistan, but it is painful for the old generation there who has seen a different life, who has tasted freedom, who has tasted, the benefits of human rights, education, connectivity with the outside world. And it's painful for the young generation who is deprived of all the rights and deprived of a meaningful future. Yes, so what we can see today, and I tried to, over the last month, and I've just started, I tried to kind of structure my thoughts around this. We can see women in the crosshairs of autocrats, not only in Afghanistan, but Afghanistan is a lesson for us, that we can see where it starts and how it ends. For now, it's not final. The French historian Emmanuel Todd has begun entertaining the notion of the West's imminent demise. Although we are not yet there, the early warning signs certainly are. So again, this is also about us, not only Afghanistan. Autocratic regimes and tendencies are on the rise in every corner of the world, and the era of de-democratization has come to us in full swing. And despite many differences, of course, and there are nuances across the new global strongman governance, the aspiring autocrats share one method and one goal: fostering a strategy of revenge against women that helps misogynistic systems and their logic flourish. bit by bit, and we can again see this in Afghanistan, in the daily lives of the women. They are instrumentalized, sidelined, and increasingly, virtually made invisible. I think this is the absolute nadir of humanity, to stand by and to watch what is happening there. So it is interesting, I think, to analyze why women are such a telltale sign. So I do think, and this is important, that this is not a women's issue. So-called women's issues are an ideal testing ground case for dictatorships and their representatives, and it helps them to see how far they push their agenda. In other words, it is important to see how willing we are to go along with revenge narratives. This is, for us, a wake-up call. They are classic first targets, the women, classic first targets. And my question now to myself and to all of us, how did we actually get there? We have been in a different space at a different point in history. Why is the oppression of women such a popular pathway for consolidating authoritarian rule? And I do think that it is time at this point to take a hard look at ourselves. Us who have been able to enjoy the fruits and plenty of democratic rule, the rule of law, freedoms over many decades. And one thing for me is clear. We have taken these freedoms, these privileges for granted for too long. We have secured over past generations, and our parents, our grandparents have secured these freedoms and these rights. In a way, collectively, we have lost sight over time of history and context. So far too little emphasis is being placed on the defense of these achievements and the preservation of these rights. So I think this is now our task. Maybe we can't do too much on the ground in Afghanistan. We can show solidarity, we can lobby, we can push for change. But I think our foremost duty must be to be present now and push back to authoritarian regimes wherever they emerge. And they're emerging around us. I don't have to give you examples. I think this is now our responsibility, and this is how we will save ourselves and our democracy, our future, the future of our children. So, Iran and Afghanistan, I think it's also important to mention Iran in solidarity, because the women of Iran have always been incredibly in solidarity with the women in Afghanistan. So both countries, and particularly Afghanistan, are case studies of what has become possible once again. Men rule over women under the thinly veiled guide of tradition, employing selective interpretations of religious texts and reinforcing their control through ritualized violence. I think this is also very important, not to fall into the trap of culture and religion. Culture and religion are open concepts, are humanitarian concepts, but that these concepts are hijacked by, again, misogynistic, extremist strongmen. I don't want to go into the abuse and what women in Afghanistan suffer. I think we got the whole list. I mean, it's painful to listen, but I think we know that by now. We're all educated, fortunately. But I think what is important, and this is for me a sign of hope, that autocrats in Taliban garb are fearful of women, particularly of educated women. And women know that their sharpest weapon is education. I mean, it is impossible to predict when the doors of universities and schools will reopen. But women are trying to organize themselves already now. Women across Afghanistan, women in the diaspora, they have a plan. So what they do is now they create places of underground teaching, schools. They organize themselves in a way that the resilience and the creativity can flourish across the country. And women across all age groups actually, across all social classes, are a force behind undermining the extremist patriarchal system. I think change will come from the women in Afghanistan. They are the driving force of resistance, and we have kind of followed the efforts of the official resistance of the Vienna dialogue here, bringing resistance groups together, and there were women included in quite some measure, which is extremely important, that from this hour of change, from the first hour of change, women have to be in the driving seat and not sidelined again. So this is important. Resistance, if it should work, and it will work, has to be inclusive. Yeah, I think I should keep it short. Yeah, time is running.
That would be great. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions.
I think that what we can see now, that the messengers of a turning point for women's rights and realities are knocking at our door everywhere beyond Afghanistan. And the noise is getting louder and louder. So it's time, I think, to open our eyes to the reality that is already audible and visible all around us. And it is definitely time to act now. And all of us in our individual and collective capacity have means to act, whether it's showing solidarity or finding ways to connect and think about the role we can play in our own societies and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schlaffer, and just good reminder that the only thing that doesn't change is change itself, but that we need to shape that change and not be complicit. And that we hope it has to come from the ground as well, but it has to be supported by all. So thank you for this very sharp reminder of that. I will now give the floor to Dr. Wolfgang Pittrich, who's the president of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and the president of the Austrian Marshall Plan Foundation. I can assure you he's not a token man on this panel. Your experience as a retired diplomat is fantastic. I will not go through the whole list, but you had several high-level positions with the EU and for Austria. I will give you the floor, and I will also excuse Ambassador Jody. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Of course, I feel particularly privileged to be the only man here at this panel, where already many, many very important things have been said. I will try to add some of what I would like to say. In particular, I would like to talk about the Vienna process for a democratic Afghanistan. Edith Schlaffer has already referred to. And I think it's important to say that here, at this very place where we are today, this is where it all started. So the Bruno Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue is actually a magic place for Afghanistan. In 2022, we started the first meeting of the Vienna process here in this very room. And we expanded over time. And the last meeting, the fifth meeting, was already held outside because it is already here too small. This is already an indication how successful the Vienna process for a democratic Afghanistan here really has become over a relatively short period of time, I should add. And I think it's important what the ambassador of Malta said. We really need a coherent strategy, and there is none around, neither on the side of the international community nor on the side of the Afghan opposition, I should add. And this is really what the Vienna process is all about. We intend to create an inclusive platform for all democratic opposition forces, and we adhere to the centrality of our efforts, and this is equality. gender equality. Of course, this is what we are talking about today, but it is also about ethnic, religious equality, social equality, and in the end, when we talk about democracy, it is of course also about political equality. So these are the central pillars of the Vienna process. And I should tell you that this has been recognized by the international community from the outset, where a lot of skepticism was around that here in Vienna we are trying to yet another armed revolution in Afghanistan. No, this is not the case. Here in Afghanistan, in Vienna, Afghanistan now in its 45th or 46th year of civil war, effective civil war, we really need to have a look at how and do we do something very and fundamentally different in order to achieve the desired goal of our principles surrounding the idea of equality and democracy and inclusion. Okay. That was the fanfare for what I have said. And I would like to continue and say that actually it all depends on individuals, and it all depends on solidarity. And if I may point out one single person who is the soul and the driving force of the Vienna process, then it's Ambassador Bakhtari. Without her and with many others, we wouldn't be where we are. And of course, there's also a younger generation, which I consider so important, which we're trying to adopt, so to speak, into our process. And Farhad is one of these wonderful young women who are really engaged in this, not just in the Vienna process, but in the outlook for a better Afghanistan as such, in humanitarian, in social ways, and also in this political way. And when I say political, I do not mean politicking. I mean a policy. I mean something which is truly democratic and truly inclusive. I believe this is so much important. And it was just said that, Edith, you were saying, and I like this very much, that actually culture, religion, which plays such an important role in abusing these expressions, it's an open concept. And this is what we are aiming for. We would like to contribute to this open concept of a cultured, of a religious Afghanistan, which is a democracy and which we here in Vienna would like to contribute by planning, by advising, by soliciting support in the international sphere. And just at the last meeting, at the 5th Vienna meeting, we had for the first time an official representative from the European Union participating. The chair of the Afghanistan delegation of the European Parliament was contributing, very engagé, really saying what she believes, what the European Union needs to do when it comes to Afghanistan. And at the end, there was an invitation for the address to the Vienna process to come and visit Brussels, to talk to them there. And this is, of course, what we're going to take up. Another invitation or another perspective is the UN Security Council, which is also interested in what we are doing here in Vienna. And as you know, there's an upcoming meeting in mid-March in New York, and we have also invited to Vienna the UNAMA head from Kabul, and she's coming to Vienna via New York. So we are really trying to see to it that the Vienna process is firmly established in the international community, but that this is Afghan-led and Afghan-driven and Afghan-owned. This is the most important thing. I can tell you, don't rely on the big powers. You have made your own experience with a great game. Let's stop this game and really go down to business, but this needs to be an Afghan business supported by all those countries, governments, NGOs, civil society who have this goodwill and the solidarity with Afghanistan.
Thank you, Dr. Petric, for this very incredible insight into the Vienna process and very informative. Something to follow, and absolutely agree that the change has come with the Afghans. I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Josipa Palek, who is the president of the International Cultural Diversity Organization, ICDO, and is an international gender champion. She's leading social development projects that support refugees, indigenous communities, and marginalized groups. She has pushed advocacy to action by coordinating the transport of over 6,000 Ukrainian refugees, worked with over 50 Maya communities, and implemented global initiatives that promote cultural diversity, human rights, gender equality, and sustainability. She will speak to the importance of culture. We spoke of education. She showcased how it empowers Afghan women, demonstrating their strength and perseverance despite severe restrictions on their rights, education, and public presence. Simply said, you will highlight the resilience of Afghan women. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for such a kind introduction. And for moderating with such a passion. And thank you, Ambassador, for inviting, and also thank you for all your work that I witnessed firsthand you have been doing in the last years. So thank you also for really amazing work. I'm really honored to be among such panelists that all share such a passion for equality. And today I stand before you not only as the president of International Cultural Diversity Organization, but also as a woman, as an advocate, and also as someone who believes that voices, especially those who have been silenced, must be amplified, celebrated, and protected. We are here and we talk today about resilience, but resilience is not just about surviving, it is about rising, reclaiming, and resisting erasure. It is about daring to dream when the world tells you that you cannot. Since August 2021, more than 3 million Afghan girls have been banned from secondary school and over 100,000 women forced out of universities, stripped of their right to education overnight. The Taliban relentless restriction have erased women from nearly every aspect of public life that we have heard also today, from classrooms to courtrooms, from government offices to media outlets. But despite these efforts to silence them, Afghan women refuse to disappear. They teach in underground schools, they document the injustices, and they find the ways to lead, even in exile. Their resilience in the purest form. At ICDO, we are very much committed to making sure their voices are not just heard, but amplified. We have worked alongside the Afghan community and together with the ambassador, giving visibility to their culture, their stories, and their ongoing struggle. One of the most powerful ways that we do it is through our flagship event, the Long Nights of Interculturality, where we celebrate cultural heritage through art, fashion, and storytelling. Every year, Afghan women's costume takes center stage, displaying the breathtaking colors and intricate embroidery that speaks of a history which is actually rich in diversity, strength, and identity. Though garments are not just fabric, they are symbols of who Afghan women are and who they refuse to stop being. But let me also share something devastating. Over 80% of Afghanistan traditional artisans, many of them who are women, have lost their livelihoods. The workshops where they once embroidered silk and stitched their heritage into clothes have gone silent. An entire cultural identity is under threat. We have another example of the upcoming Nowruz, which is intangible cultural heritage of humanity, celebrated in many countries, also in Afghanistan, which is dismissed as pagan. We also have artistic expression, which is considered now a crime. We have artists, including musicians, painters, and writers, that have been forced to flee. We have example of Hanis Hamras, a refugee who is now residing in Indonesia. We have museums, archives, arts, and cultural institutions which are completely closed. We also know that Afghanistan has a long tradition of poetry with renewed poets who actually are playing a crucial role in Afghan culture, often reflecting themes of love, loss, and resilience. Afghan artisans are also known as exquisite carpets, textiles, and jewelry, which are not just economic products, but also cultural expressions. The carpet weaving tradition, for instance, is a significant aspect of Afghan identity, with each region having its unique designs and patterns. We all know that UNESCO has highlighted the threats to Afghanistan cultural heritage, including sites like the Buddhas of Bamiyan, which we all know are destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. The ongoing instability raises concerns about the preservation of other historical sites. Reports indicate that artists, musicians, and writers faced persecution under the Taliban regime, leading to a stifling of a cultural expression. This suppression threatens the transmissions of cultural knowledge and identity to future generations. So this is why our fight is not just about the policy. It is about preserving the very soul of Afghanistan women, because when a culture is erased, so is its future. So today we are asked, how can we respond? Will we let them stand alone, or the voices lost in the wind, or we will stand together with Afghanistan women and men, amplify them, and ensure that their stories shape the future? Here are some of the actually very beautiful Afghanistan women and men in their traditional costumes, and very rich costumes, I might say. At ICDO, so we are making this commitment. We are gonna continue working with embassies, cultural institutions, leaders to ensure Afghan women remain visible on global platforms. We will create more opportunities for Afghan women in exile, and we will keep using our cultural and also really important social media platforms to tell their stories through exhibitions, symposiums, and the power of art. But of course, we cannot do this alone. That's why I'm very thankful to be here. Governments must open doors, universities must offer scholarship, international community must do more, and businesses must create opportunities. To every Afghan woman who has lost so much, but refuses to give up, we see you, we hear you, and we will not stop fighting alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pollack, for your work and the efforts. And also, you said the power of art. So that brings me, you showcased it, and it brings me to our last speaker, but not the least. No, I mean it. Mrs. Nathalie Haller, she's an independent Austrian documentary filmmaker on the topics of human rights. This is a form of art as well, but one that speaks to something that is her own life credo, that the defense of human and especially women's rights is everyone's responsibility and duty. So the floor is yours to speak to us about the importance of human rights and women's rights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear ambassador, for inviting me here. You changed the rules. Usually you were sitting here and I was filming you. Now your team is filming me. This was your revenge, I guess. Human rights are very, very dear to me. And I think it's a responsibility, not just for the society to fight for human rights, but also for each of us, for us as individuals. And so what can I do? I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker, and so I use this weapon to tell stories which are important to be told and to make things not forgotten. And when the Taliban takeover happened, I decided to start a new journey as filmmaker. And I started to accompany Mrs. Bakhtari, and Manizha, my friend Manizha, my very dear friend, and her team in her indefatigable efforts to stand up for the rights of the women in Afghanistan. And it was a very long and very important journey, which I completed now. The film is called The Last Ambassador. In this film, I also talk about the Vienna process. So actually, all the topics which have been talked here about by the panelists are somehow part of the story of this film. It will now start traveling through the world. The world premiere will be soon in Copenhagen, and I think it's so important to use this audiovisual media to tell about human rights, to tell about women's rights, and especially tell about the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, because it's a very powerful media, and this movie will also go to Austrian cinemas everywhere. And it will definitely travel the world, and so that's all what I could do. I wish I could do more, but I hope it's a small help that women and girls are not forgotten.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Haller. And perhaps a call that we get a screening and an opportunity to have a conversation after seeing the film. I think that you really got my attention, and some efforts from us diplomats as well to see how we can support in diffusing this through our own network. So thank you very much for your dedication in doing this. It has been a very long panel, a very rich discussion. I will not use the word insightful because we always do that when we want to kind of close on things. It was much more than that. Actually, it opens the discussion for rich debates. There's question, I'm sure. We might be a little bit limited on time. I'm told that we do have time, but at the same time, the audience as well, there's interest. So what I would propose is, let's start with the first round of questions from the audience. I think it's time for you to engage. We have the panelists. We'll ask them. We'll take a few questions, and let's see where that brings us in terms of the timing. So anybody wants to break the ice?
Thank you. So first of all, I want to pay my greatest respect and solidarity with all women of Afghanistan and worldwide women who suffer for his right and fight against, and also for the people who help them in that fight. My question is what are you thinking? How deep is involved in that problem of human rights of the woman in many countries, Afghanistan? The Islamic way of life under Sharia law and Wahhabi way of practicing Islam. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a...
Hello, good evening. Thank you for organizing this event and having such distinguished panelists here. I have a particular question to Your Excellencies, Ambassador of Canada and also Ambassador of Ireland. I do appreciate, and I'm, as a person from Afghanistan, I'm grateful for your country's efforts when it comes to the women's rights and also the situation of Afghanistan. But talking about the women's rights in Afghanistan and all these severe violations of many conventions, not only CEDAW or not only the Rome Statute, but any human rights treaty that we know, not only those from the UN, but all other treaties. If we look deep, these all treaties, most of its provisions are breached by the Taliban. But supporting and giving voice to the women of Afghanistan is absolutely something that is highly, highly important. But without any specific political steps, we cannot realize those rights for the women of Afghanistan. We cannot push the Taliban to anything. So the question is, even within the outcome of the resolution 2679 of the United Nations Security Council, and also the recommendations by this independent assessment, there need to be a cohesive approach to Afghanistan, but also a political approach. Is there anything specific from your countries concerning those political steps to make a real change and to push for a real change in Afghanistan? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? There's one in the back, if perhaps, okay. Thank you. And if I could ask if you don't mind introducing yourselves as much as possible, so thank you.
Hello, I'm Binu Jacob. My question is to Josepa, ICDO. Could you elaborate how the long nights of interculturality could contribute to enhancing the Afghan women's culture? Thank you.
Thank you. And we can take a fourth question here in the front. And then we'll go to around
yes.
the
I know an Afghan family in Vienna, and they go regularly on holiday in Afghanistan. And they told me, yes, it's much safer now, it's much better now. And my question is, how much support do the Taliban have in Afghanistan? And where are the men? Do they support this regime? Do they all support it? Is there any opposition? Do they want their wives and children to be, or daughters to be uneducated? That's my question.
Thank you. I will. I see there are some questions for different people. Perhaps we'll. I think that I would ask whoever has been on the ground, and we can even invite Ambassador Bakhtari to kind of answer this too. But some of the questions go to situation on the ground. So perhaps you can start, and if the first and last question are more for people who've been on the ground, experienced it, and have views. So, and I will leave Anne-Marie and I to close on the more specific questions of our countries.
Thank you very much. That's actually a very good question that I want to answer, because we don't get it only from people who watch Afghanistan from outside who say, oh, Afghanistan now safe. Well, safe for who, first and foremost, because if Afghanistan was unsafe the past 20 years, it was because of the Taliban. I was in Afghanistan, I lived in Afghanistan, and every single time my dad was late from work coming home, I would freak out thinking something has happened to him, the Taliban kidnapped him, he was a victim of a bomb attack that happened, and so many people share this anxiety and fear because of the attacks that was constantly happening by the Taliban in the country. So if Afghanistan was unsafe, and the fact that I lived there for 7 years but never went outside the city of Kabul because it was so unsafe. On the way, Taliban would stop you and just shoot you at blank point. I mean, we have Mansour is a Hazara, and we have a whole Hazara genocide going on in Afghanistan for the past 100 years, and even now, even worse. Where women and girls and men, whoever it was, if they were traveling by road, the Taliban would stop them at some point and then shoot them at point blank. And if they were traveling, they would just kidnap them, kidnap rich families, and in exchange for money, kidnap journalists, foreign journalists. If Afghanistan was unsafe in any way, it was because of the Taliban. And now that they are in power, they want to portray this safe image to the outside in order to get recognized. They're desperate for recognition. That's why they try to pressure governments, they try to pressure embassies, they try to negotiate about taking refugees back with no guarantee that any of the refugees that will be deported from these countries will not come back even more radicalized to commit more crimes here in Austria, or maybe commit terrorist attacks here in Austria, because the Taliban are against all the Western values. I mean, if you look at their Twitter accounts, they constantly, now that they're on Twitter very actively, they post about their everything, and they constantly threaten women here who advocate. I mean, just 3 days ago, one of the women that, I don't know if I can share it, I'm not going to share the name, but one of the women that actually participated in the Vienna conference, who is also an activist, people intruded in her home in Paris because she was another woman who's advocating actively against the Taliban, Manizha Hamidi, who's vocal, and her case is, posted everywhere online in the news. She was attacked by Taliban members, not members, but supporters of the Taliban in the West who lobby or support the Taliban regime and outside the country, even the activists who work outside the country. I mean, inside, the women have no voice anyway. The Taliban forced them all into exile or imprisoned them, most of them. They're so afraid that they can't do anything, but even those who are outside Afghanistan, their lives are in danger as well because the Taliban supporters, because the Taliban themselves online keep posting information about these activists and encourage their supporters to go and attack them and stab them. There are tweets of them, it's made into the news. Whoever talks against our regime will be stabbed. We will show them, and the people to whom these incidents have happened, they use that as an example. I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure how many threats Ms. Bakhtari has received for her work, for her extraordinary work the past 3 years, not only as an ambassador, but everything else that she has done the past years for Afghanistan and for the women of Afghanistan. I also just wanted to mention that it's an honor of my life to know you and to work with you. Yeah, but back to the question, it is not safe, and people who do travel to Afghanistan, they couldn't do it in so many years because of the unsafety, and now that they do, it's because the Taliban themselves are in the regime, and they don't want anyone to have a bad picture. People from outside Afghanistan traveling to the country for them to have a bad image from Afghanistan, because these people will go out of the country and speak to other people and say Afghanistan is safe. But Afghanistan is not safe for its own people. It's an open-air prison. I mean, how can we talk about safety when there is no shelter for women anymore? There are no safe houses for women who run away from Taliban or from their abusive husbands or from their abusive family members, when there's no justice, when there's no system where you can go and complain or ask for accountability. There's no safety in Afghanistan, and I would really encourage everyone to think critically when people come up to you and say Afghanistan is safe, because what does safety mean when there's no peace, where there's no justice, where there's no accountability? Thank you. But thank you for your question.
Also, if you want to answer the question
yes,
directed to
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. So Long Nights of Interculturality is a cultural festival, which is annual festival every September in Vienna. We cooperate with more than 30 embassies, with different cultural institutions. We have different panel discussions, and we have seen some photos from Costumes of the World, where I have to say we're very honored that we also cooperate with Ambassador, who has been on our panel actually last year, and also there is a lot of biases about how Afghan women are dressed, how their traditional costume look like, and as we can see, we're very proud that one of our events, we have Costumes of the World, where there is more than 1,000 people in magnificent Rathaus, where Afghan women are coming and showcasing their costumes. So we are working against biases and prejudices and giving more visibility to Afghan cause and also Afghan culture. So this is one of the ways that what we are doing during the Long Nights of Interculturality. I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Do you want to say any other words for no? I mean, for some of the questions on the ground, the situation, but if not, then we can pass it to Dr. Basakala.
I think it's quite late, but the meeting today gives me hope. You know, I mean, Afghanistan is certainly not on top of the agenda of international discussions, but it should be. And I think there are a lot of messages coming out which could be a guiding force for other countries that are under threat, where women's rights are deteriorating. I think we can learn a lot from Afghanistan, and I'm particularly delighted about the young voices we have here, because the youth is the future of Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is an incredibly young country, and most of the people have not gone through, you know, periods their parents and grandparents lived through. For them, it's a new era and a very dark era. So this should not stop there. The windows have to open, and I think we are part of those who make that possible. It depends on Ambassador, as you said. There's no coherent plan. I can see plans here. They might not be coherent, but we're on the right path, you know, piecing this together. I think it is an uphill struggle, an uphill journey. But if we join forces, I'm very confident that we arrive somewhere, and I'm proud to sit here at the Bruno Kreisky Forum. Bruno Kreisky was an icon, and he was a fierce defender of women's rights. I had the pleasure to do an interview with him when I was a young teacher at the university, and he told me, talking about women's rights and advocating for human rights, women's rights, don't ask the public, just do it. Don't rely on the sentiment of the public. It was already anticipated that there might be different turns into the wrong direction or into the extremist right-wing direction, where women's rights are certainly not cherished and honored. So I do think it is a fantastic place. Vienna is the right place. Vienna used to be very proud of its dialogue capacity that has not been used and exploited over a long time. But I do think the Vienna process is maybe part of a new beginning, and we should all be grateful for the wonderful diplomats, activists, and co-participants in these efforts to focus on intelligent power, soft power, and not trusting in armed struggles around the globe.
Thank you very much. I must agree with Dr. Schaefer. I think this is very much a collective effort. I think it's not a question that there's one magic bullet, that, for example, that individual countries can somehow turn this big ship around and change everything. But I do think, and exactly as Ambassador Dowdy said also, you know, we must make our contribution, and there are very many ways of doing that. As I said previously, in Ireland's case, it's about speaking up in various international fora. It's about supporting civil society, which we are doing, and human rights defenders. It's about focusing on gender equality in education. It's about providing development, official development assistance. For example, in the last year that we have full statistics, which is 2023, or disaggregated statistics, I should say, like Ireland provided 4.2 million for Afghanistan, obviously not to the Taliban, but for support for the people of Afghanistan. And that's a small number in many ways, but at the same time, it's an important number. And I think if all of us put our shoulder to the wheel, if everybody does their piece in every way possible, exactly as Dr. Schaefer says, we will make progress. I mean, we are in a very difficult situation now. I think we have to be honest about that. Mm-hmm. Like we're seeing, and I think you will agree with me, Veronique, we're seeing that there's a global pushback even against basic concepts like gender equality. So we're finding that we're having to really defend that concept, you know, as a really central established pillar of policy in the EU, the OSCE, in the UN. You know, we're having to stand up and be counted and really push back against this rollback. And we're seeing that all over the place. And that's not that I'm saying that, you know, it's a cause for despair. Not at all. I think in many ways this is pushing us to do more, to step forward more, to defend basic rights, to defend these important principles. And you know, as I say, there's no greater example of where this can lead us than what we've seen in Afghanistan. And I think we've got to support the people of Afghanistan to turn this around, but we also have to make sure that we try to prevent backsliding in other areas as well. Let me hand it.
I have that mic, but yes, thank you. Thank you for that. I was not necessarily prepared to answer questions, but I will do on this one. I think there's been pressure sometimes more recently to say that if we recognize the Taliban regime, we will bring change, positive change. I and that's a personal opinion, it's not Canada's opinion. Personally, what I've seen of history is that when we do that, there's absolutely no guarantee. On the contrary, it was done with Myanmar, and then we saw that it went back. So I would say, for the moment, Canada is definitely has no intention, no desire to see normalization with the Taliban regime. It's not a government, and we don't want to work with such a regime. And the last thing we want to see is some sort of normalization of them, of what has been done, of all the violation. Unfortunately, we're in a world where violating international law, international human rights law, the UN Charter, they don't have the monopoly, unfortunately. But that being said, when I was there, I had to recognize that, you know, I was there through, well, for Canada, but through ISAF, the coalition of NATO. We had been preceded by the Soviets, who thought they could bring change to Afghanistan. And before that, the British could change Afghanistan. I don't believe that external force will change Afghanistan. It has to come from the inside. It has to come from education. It has to come from the people, but it has to be supported by the international community through pressure. There's no magic bullet, unfortunately. Otherwise, it would be fantastic. We should have done that a long time ago. The solution is not an easy one, but change happens, as you said earlier, with time. And the most important thing with change is to make sure that it's being shaped in the right direction and the pressure is maintained. So that, as I say, I think that's the role of what we do and doing such event and panels. You know, I'm here in my personal capacity, but with my government's support in doing, you know, small things like moderating a fantastic panel. So these are little steps. So thank you again, Ambassador Bakhtari. And I think we can bring this to a conclusion. It's been long, it's been rich. I think there's as well some refreshment waiting. Thank you so much for being here for the panel. Dr. Scarpita, we're not forgetting you. You've been there as well. It's been very enriching for myself, and I appreciate this, and I hope that we get other events of this nature and perhaps a film screening. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists for their valuable contributions and to our wonderful moderator for leading such a thought-provoking discussion. A special thank you to all our guests for joining us and being part of this important conversation. I would request our esteemed panelists for a group photo, and then I invite you all to continue the discussion in a more informal setting over tea, coffee, and a small iftari. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.